My name is Rachel, 35 years old, and I'm sitting in my car outside my own house, watching my husband's truck in the driveway next to my sister's BMW. They think I'm at a medical conference in Chicago for 3 more days. But the conference ended early, and I drove home to surprise my family. Now I'm holding my phone, my sister's husband David, already on speed dial, about to destroy 2 marriages with one call. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I expose the ultimate family betrayal. I need to take you back 6 months to understand how I missed every sign. Matthew and I had been married 12 years together since college at Penn State, where he played baseball, and I was pre-med. We had the kind of love story people envied high school sweethearts from the same small Pennsylvania town who made it through college, long-distance med school stress residency hours, and came out stronger. Our house in suburban Philadelphia was everything we'd dreamed about during those broke student years. 4 bedrooms, a pool, the kitchen I'd designed myself with its 6-burner stove and marble island where I cooked Sunday dinners for the whole family. We'd paid off my student loans last year, a celebration that included champagne and plans for finally trying for children. Matthew worked as a physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic, his schedule flexible enough to handle house responsibilities while I worked hospital shifts. He was the husband who brought me coffee during overnight shifts, who rubbed my feet after 14-hour days, who still left love notes in my scrubs pockets after 12 years. My colleagues called him a unicorn, the rare husband who actually understood a female physician's demands. My younger sister Lisa moved to Philadelphia 3 years ago after her wedding to David, a software engineer who'd gotten transferred to his company's main office. She was 32, worked as an interior designer, the creative one while I was the scientific one. Growing up, we'd been opposites but close. I helped her with homework. She helped me seem less nerdy. I was maid of honor at her wedding. She'd be matron of honor at our vow renewal next year. The 4 of us became this perfect unit. Double dates every Friday, vacations to the Outer Banks season, tickets to the Eagles, where Matthew and David bonded over their mutual obsession. Lisa decorated our house for free. I diagnosed David's migraines. Matthew helped with David's golf swing. David fixed our computers. We joked about buying adjacent houses when kids came along, raising cousins like siblings. Lisa and David had been trying for a baby for 2 years without success. The fertility struggles strained their marriage in ways they tried to hide, but I could see. David threw himself into work, Lisa into her design projects, both avoiding the elephant of empty bedrooms meant for children. As a doctor, I tried recommending specialists, but as a sister, I mostly just listened to Lisa cry in my kitchen once a month when another pregnancy test came back negative. Matthew was especially supportive of Lisa during this time. He'd lost his younger brother to cancer 5 years ago, understood the weight of family grief. When David traveled for work, which happened increasingly often, Matthew would check on Lisa, bring her groceries, fix things around their house. I loved him more for his kindness to my sister, the way he treated her like his own family. Looking back, I see it all differently now. The Tuesday night dinners when David was in Seattle and I had hospital shifts. The way Lisa suddenly got interested in Matthew's baseball memorabilia collection, spending hours in our basement looking through his college trophies. How she started wearing yoga pants and fitted tops when she knew he'd be around, claiming she'd joined his gym and wanted workout advice. There were moments that should have registered as wrong. Lisa asking detailed questions about our sex life during wine nights, playing it off as sisterly concern. Matthew mentioning Lisa's marriage problems more often than seemed appropriate. The way they laughed at inside jokes I didn't understand. How Lisa knew where everything was in our kitchen, even things I'd recently moved. 3 months ago, Lisa started a renovation project on their master bedroom, claiming she needed to stay busy while David traveled. She'd come over with fabric samples and paint chips, spreading them across our dining room table, asking Matthew's opinion on masculine versus feminine design elements. I was working night shifts that month, sleeping during the days, grateful my sister had company, while I recovered from brutal overnight traumas. Matthew became her unofficial assistant on the renovation. He'd help her carry furniture samples, drive her to design showrooms, offer opinions on crown molding and light fixtures. David seemed relieved someone else was handling Lisa's projects, wiring money for whatever she wanted, too buried in his new product launch to pay attention. I thought it was sweet my husband helping my struggling sister. The conference in Chicago was my first professional trip in 2 years, a cardiac surgery symposium I'd been invited to speak at about a new technique I'd developed. 3 days away seemed like nothing, a chance to focus on my career network with colleagues. Maybe remember who I was beyond wife and doctor. Matthew drove me to the airport, kissing me goodbye, like always saying he'd miss me, but would keep busy with work. Lisa texted me that first night asking about the conference, mentioning she'd stopped by the house to borrow my stand mixer for David's birthday cake. Normal sister stuff. Matthew called before bed telling me about his day, a difficult patient with torn ACL, plans to catch up on Netflix shows I didn't like. Everything exactly as it should be, as it had been for 12 years. The conference was incredible that first day. My presentation went perfectly. Surgeons from Johns Hopkins and Mayo asking about collaboration opportunities. I felt like myself again, the physician who'd graduated third in her class, who'd been chief resident, who'd published papers in major journals. That night, colleagues invited me for drinks celebrating my presentation, making me remember I had value beyond being Matthew's wife or Lisa's sister. The second morning, the keynote speaker had a family emergency. The afternoon sessions got canceled while organizers scrambled to reschedule. Suddenly, I had an unexpected free afternoon and evening in Chicago, and my first thought wasn't shopping or sightseeing, but home. I wanted to surprise Matthew, maybe have a romantic dinner, celebrate my successful presentation properly. I changed my flight to that afternoon, didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. The thought of surprising Matthew made me giddy, like we were newlyweds again. I imagined his face when I walked through the door, the way he'd spin me around in the kitchen, how we'd order Thai food from our favorite place and eat in bed while I told him about the conference. The flight was delayed 2 hours, so I didn't land in Philadelphia until 8:30 that night. By the time I got my car from long-term parking and hit traffic on the Schuylkill, it was nearly 10. I almost called Matthew twice, but stopped myself, wanting to preserve the surprise. I'd been gone less than 48 hours, but missed him like it had been weeks. When I turned onto our street, I noticed Lisa's BMW in our driveway immediately. My first thought was worry that something had happened to David. Maybe he'd had another migraine, the bad kind that sent him to the emergency room. Maybe Lisa needed Matthew's help with something urgent. I parked on the street rather than pulling into the garage, not wanting to announce my arrival until I understood the situation. The house was mostly dark except for the living room lights and something flickering upstairs. Our bedroom. I walked quietly to the front door, keys ready, still thinking there must be an emergency. The door was unlocked, which Matthew only did when expecting someone. I pushed it open slowly, heard music playing softly. Our wedding playlist, the one we only played on anniversaries. That's when I knew. Before I saw anything, before I heard anything definitive, I knew. The knowledge hit me like cardiac arrest, sudden and stopping everything. But I kept moving, phone already in my hand. David's number already pulled up, because if my world was ending, I wasn't going through it alone. I stood in my own foyer like a stranger, listening to sounds that shouldn't exist in my home. Laughter from upstairs, intimate and familiar. The clink of glasses. My sister's voice saying something I couldn't make out, then Matthew's deeper response. The creak of our bedroom floorboards, the ones I'd been asking him to fix for months. My hands moved without conscious thought, opening my phone's camera, switching to video mode. The rational part of my brain, the surgeon who documented everything, took over, while my emotional self floated somewhere near the ceiling, watching this woman who looked like me but couldn't be me, creep up her own stairs like a burglar. The master bedroom door was partially open enough to see without being seen. They were on our bed, the one we'd bought together at Pottery Barn, arguing over thread counts and laughing at ourselves for being so domestic. Lisa wore my robe, the silk one Matthew had given me last Christmas. Matthew was shirtless, pouring wine into glasses we'd gotten as wedding gifts, the Waterford crystal we only used for special occasions. They weren't having sex. Somehow that made it worse. They were comfortable, familiar, like this was routine. Lisa had her legs across his lap, his hand absently stroking her calf, while he talked about something from work. She was painting her toenails with my polish, the OPI red I'd bought last week. The intimacy of it, the casual domesticity showed this wasn't new or accidental or a moment of weakness. I recorded 43 seconds before Lisa said something that made me stop breathing. She mentioned that David thought she was at a hotel design seminar in New York, wouldn't be back until tomorrow afternoon. Matthew laughed and said I was probably already drunk with my conference friends, that I never could hold my wine after long days. They knew their spouses' schedules. They'd planned this. That's when I called David. He answered on the second ring, sounding tired, but not asleep. Rachel. Everything okay? Isn't it late in Chicago? His voice was so normal, so unsuspecting that I almost hung up. Instead, I whispered that he needed to come to my house right now, not to call Lisa, just come. Something in my voice must have conveyed the urgency, because he didn't ask questions, just said he'd be there in 10 minutes. I crept back downstairs, my bare feet silent on carpet we'd chosen together, past photos of our families at various holidays, past Lisa's purse on my kitchen counter like she lived here. I went outside to wait for David, needing air that didn't smell like betrayal. The spring night was cool, normal suburban sounds of televisions and dogs, and lives not falling apart. David's Tesla pulled up 9 minutes later, his face tight with worry as he got out. He was wearing pajama pants and a Penn State hoodie, clearly having left immediately after my call. Rachel, what's wrong? Is it Matthew? Is someone hurt? The concern in his voice for my husband, his friend, made what I had to show him even worse. I held up my phone, showed him the video without words, watched his face change from confusion to recognition to something beyond devastation. He played it twice, then looked at the house like it might explain what couldn't be explained. His hand shook as he gave me back the phone. How long was all he asked? I don't know, I admitted. But they're comfortable. This isn't the first time. We stood in my driveway, two betrayed spouses, trying to process the impossible. David was crying silently, the kind of tears that come when everything you believe turns out to be false. I wasn't crying yet, still in the shocked stage that follows traumatic injury, when the body protects itself by going numb. David wiped his face, suddenly angry. I want to see them. I want them to see us seeing them. I understood that need for confrontation, for witnesses to their shame. We walked to my front door together, united in our devastation. I turned my key deliberately loud, called out like I always did. Honey, I'm home. But with David beside me, the words carried different weight. The sounds upstairs stopped immediately. Scrambling whispers, the bathroom door slamming. Matthew appeared at the top of the stairs in boxers and nothing else, his face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Rachel, you're supposed to be... His voice died when he saw David. Lisa came out of the bathroom wearing my clothes, my university sweatshirt and yoga pants I'd worn yesterday. Her face was flushed hair, messed lips swollen. She saw David and made a sound like an animal caught in a trap. Baby, this isn't... she started, but David held up his hand. Don't, he said quietly. Just don't. The four of us stood frozen in this horrible tableau, the evidence undeniable, the marriage certificates we all had framed somewhere now, just expensive paper. Matthew tried to speak twice, his mouth opening and closing like he was drowning in our living room. Lisa started crying, the manipulative kind, with gasps and shaking, but neither David nor I moved to comfort her. I was the one who broke the silence. How long? Matthew looked at Lisa. Lisa looked at the floor. 4 months, she finally whispered. Since January. Since my promotion to surgical director had meant longer hours. Since David's travels increased. Since we'd trusted them with each other and with us. Every Tuesday when I worked late and David traveled. Every Saturday morning when I had rounds and David golfed. Every opportunity they could steal, they'd taken. Get out, I told them both. Pack what you need for tonight and get out. This is my house too. Matthew started, but I cut him off with the kind of look I used in the operating room when residents questioned my decisions. The house might be half his, but right now possession was 9/10 of everything, and I had David as my witness. Lisa tried to go to our bedroom for her things, but I blocked the stairs. Those are my clothes you're wearing. Your purse is in the kitchen. Take it and leave. She looked at Matthew for support, but he was already grabbing his gym bag from the hall closet, shoving in whatever he could find. David hadn't moved or spoken since asking them not to lie. He watched his wife like she was a stranger wearing Lisa's face. When she tried to approach him, he stepped behind me, using me as a shield against her tears and apologies. "She's not coming home," he said to no one in particular. "The locks will be changed." Matthew found his keys, his wallet, his phone, the everyday items that let someone function outside their home. He looked around our living room like he was memorizing it, probably realizing this was the last time he'd see it like this, intact in his. Lisa grabbed her purse, her car keys rattling as her hands shook. They looked at each other, these two people who'd destroyed 2 marriages for Tuesday nights and stolen mornings. There was no romance in it now, just 2 selfish people covered in the debris of their choices. They couldn't even leave together, having to take separate cars to wherever cheaters go when their lives implode. Matthew paused at the door. "Rachel, we need to talk about this." "No," I said. "We need lawyers. I have evidence. David has evidence. What we don't need is to talk." Lisa made one more attempt with David mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Please, baby, let me explain." David laughed, bitter and sharp. "Explain what?" "How you fucked my friend in my sister-in-law's bed. How you planned it while I thought you were grieving our infertility. How you used my work trips as your affair schedule. What exactly would you like to explain?" She flinched at his words, probably never having heard him speak with such venom. David was the gentle one, the tech nerd who cried at Pixar movies, who brought her flowers every Friday. This new David, hard and cold, was someone none of us recognized. They left within minutes of each other, Matthew first, then Lisa. David and I stood in my doorway, watching their taillights disappear the suburban street, returning to its peaceful illusion. Someone was barbecuing late, the smell of charcoal and meat nauseating in its normalcy. "I need a drink," I said. "I need several," David replied. We went to my kitchen, where Lisa's wine glass from earlier still sat on the counter, her lipstick on the rim like evidence at a crime scene. I poured us both bourbon, Matthew's good stuff he saved for celebrations. This seemed to qualify as an occasion worth marking the death of 2 marriages, the birth of whatever came next. David and I sat at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning, drinking bourbon and documenting everything. He pulled up credit card statements on his phone, finding charges he'd ignored before. Hotels during lunch hours, restaurants. When Lisa claimed to be with clients' lingerie from stores she'd never shopped at before. I did the same with Matthew's accounts, seeing the pattern now, the Tuesday afternoon gaps, the cash withdrawals that didn't match his usual habits. We created a shared folder, uploading evidence with the efficiency of 2 people used to managing data. David worked in tech. I worked in medicine. We both understood the value of documentation. The video from tonight, the credit card records, screenshots of text messages we could now decode. Lisa telling David she'd be at their house when she was clearly here. Matthew saying he was grabbing drinks with coworkers when his coworkers would testify otherwise. By dawn, we had 42 pieces of evidence, enough to bury them in any divorce proceeding. David had already changed his banking passwords, removed Lisa from the credit cards, locked her out of their joint investment accounts. I'd done the same with Matthew, 12 years of financial entanglement severed with keystrokes while coffee brewed and birds started singing like this was a normal Sunday morning. Neither of us had slept. We looked like disaster survivors, which we were. David's eyes were red and swollen, my hands shook from caffeine and adrenaline. But we'd formed this strange alliance, the Betrayed Spouses Club nobody wants to join. We understood each other's pain in a way nobody else could. "I should go," David said as sunlight filled the kitchen. "Need to pack her things before she tries to come home." "I'll help," I offered, surprising us both. But I needed to do something, and packing Lisa's life into boxes seemed like appropriate revenge. We drove separate cars to their house, a craftsman bungalow 6 blocks away, that Lisa had spent 2 years decorating to perfection. Every room staged like a magazine spread proof of her aesthetic eye that I'd always admired. Now it felt like a museum to a marriage that had been dying while looking beautiful. David moved mechanically through their bedroom, pulling Lisa's clothes from hangers, emptying her drawers into garbage bags. No care for designer dresses or expensive shoes, everything treated like contaminated waste. I worked on her office, packing her design samples and client files into boxes, finding more evidence as I went. A day planner with dates marked M that corresponded to David's travel schedule, receipt for lingerie hidden in her desk drawer, the credit card payment from David's account, but the purchase date when he'd been in Portland. Hotel loyalty program statement showing points earned from stays she'd never mentioned. Each discovery, another nail in the coffin of who we thought we'd married. We worked in grim efficiency, 2 surgeons excising cancer from our lives. By noon, everything Lisa owned was in bags and boxes in the garage. David had already called a locksmith scheduled for that afternoon. He'd texted Lisa that her things would be outside from 2 to 4, after that they'd be at Goodwill. My phone had 63 missed calls from Matthew, 41 from Lisa. David's was similarly bombarded. We'd both turned off our ringers, letting them panic in the silence they deserved. Eventually, we'd have to talk to them through lawyers, but not today. Today was for grief and rage, and the strange comfort of shared devastation. I went home to do the same purging. Matthew's clothes into trash bags, his baseball memorabilia into boxes. 12 years of accumulated life sorted into his and mine with surgical precision. The wedding photos came off the walls. Our faces young and stupid with hope. The anniversary gifts, the love notes, the ticket stubs from dates we'd saved, all into a box marked evidence of fraud. Jennifer, my best friend since residency, came over when I finally answered her 15th call. She brought wine and tissues and violent rage on my behalf. She helped me move Matthew's boxes to the garage, helped me change the locks, helped me believe I'd survive this. She'd been through her own divorce 3 years ago, knew the stages of grief I'd cycle through. That night she stayed over, sleeping in the guest room in case Matthew tried to come back. He didn't, but Lisa did, pounding on my door at midnight, wailing about sisterhood and mistakes and forgiveness. Jennifer called the police while I watched from my bedroom window as my sister was escorted off my property. The neighbors' lights turning on one by one to witness her humiliation. Monday morning I went to work because routine was all I had left. My colleagues noticed something was wrong but didn't push when I said I needed space. I performed a valve repair on a 60-year-old grandmother, my hands steady, despite my life falling apart. Inside the OR, I could control outcomes. I could fix hearts, even if mine was irreparable. David filed for divorce that same day, serving Lisa at the design firm where she worked. She was escorted from the building in hysterics, her business partner calling David to say she was taking an indefinite leave of absence. Matthew got served at his clinic in front of patients and colleagues because I'd specifically requested the most public option available. Our phones became battlegrounds of text messages, voicemails, emails, begging for reconciliation. Matthew claimed it meant nothing that Lisa had pursued him during a vulnerable time. Lisa claimed Matthew had seduced her, that she'd been weak from fertility struggles. Neither took responsibility. Both blamed the other, sometimes blamed us for working too much, traveling too much, not being enough. 2 days after discovery, David forwarded me an email from Lisa that broke something inside me. She'd written that she'd always been jealous of me, the successful doctor with the perfect husband. That she'd wanted what I had since we were children. That Matthew had made her feel special in a way David never did. That maybe if I'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have needed her. I forwarded it to my lawyer, adding it to the evidence pile that was becoming a mountain. The lawyers moved fast once they saw what we had. Pennsylvania doesn't have true no-fault divorce when adultery is proven, and we had proof in abundance. The hotel receipts, the credit card fraud, of using marital assets for an affair, the video from that night, the admission of 4 months of deception. Both Matthew and Lisa hired attorneys, but there wasn't much to defend. The financial untangling revealed more betrayal. Matthew had opened a separate savings account 3 months ago, moving small amounts from our joint account every week. Lisa had been charging things for their affair to David's business credit card, writing them off as client entertainment. They'd been stealing from us to fund their relationship, adding financial infidelity to the emotional destruction. My parents flew in from Florida when I finally told them. They'd loved Matthew like a son called him their favorite son-in-law, even though he was their only one. My mother cried harder than I had, grieving the future grandchildren she'd imagined. My father went quiet, the kind of angry that simmered rather than exploded. He'd walked Lisa down the aisle at her wedding, given her away to David with joy. Now he said her name like it burned his mouth. The extended family took sides without being asked. Aunts who'd celebrated our weddings now deleted Lisa from Facebook. Cousins who'd grown up with us chose loyalty to the betrayed over the betrayers. Our grandmother, 93 and sharp as ever, called Lisa a common whore, and me an angel for not burning down their lives completely, though I'd considered it. Matthew's family was mortified. His mother, Catherine, called me crying, apologizing for raising a son capable of such cruelty. His father, Robert, a retired minister, offered to testify about Matthew's character if it would help my case. His sister, Emma, sent me flowers with a card that simply said, "He's an idiot, and you deserve better." They'd been my family for 12 years, and they chose me over their blood. 2 weeks after discovery, I found out through the hospital gossip network that Matthew and Lisa had moved in together, renting a condo downtown. The audacity of it going public with their relationship before the divorces were even filed showed a level of delusion I couldn't comprehend. They posted a photo on Instagram, Lisa's account, since Matthew had been blocked by everyone, showing them cooking dinner together with the caption, "Sometimes the heart wants what it wants." David screenshot it, sent it to me with just question marks. I replied with vomit emojis, our new language of shared disgust. The medical community rallied around me. Nurses who'd worked with me for years suddenly became protective, screening my calls, bringing me coffee during long shifts. Other doctors shared their own divorce stories, creating a support network I hadn't known existed. My chief of surgery adjusted my schedule without being asked, giving me flexibility for lawyer appointments and court dates. Matthew's clinic wasn't as supportive. 3 of his major referring physicians pulled their patients after hearing what happened. His reputation as the good guy physical therapist crumbled when the story spread. Affairs happen, but affairs with your wife's sister, while your brother-in-law traveled for work, crossed lines that even serial cheaters respected. A month into the legal proceedings, Lisa tried to ambush me at the hospital. She waited in the parking garage, approaching as I walked to my car after a 16-hour shift. She looked terrible, weight loss making her look gaunt, rather than thin designer clothes replaced with sweatpants and Matthew's old college hoodie. "Please, Rachel, just talk to me. I'm your sister. We're family." I stopped, looked at her with the detachment I used for difficult diagnoses. "You were my sister. Now you're just the woman who fucked my husband in my bed while I was saving lives." "That's not fair," she started, but I cut her off. "Fair you want to talk about? Fair would have been you staying away from my husband. Fair would have been Matthew keeping his wedding vows. Fair would have been not planning your affair around our work schedules. Nothing about this is fair, Lisa. But it is what it is." I left her crying in the parking garage, security already heading her way after seeing her on cameras. She was banned from hospital property the next day. Trespassing charges threatened if she returned. David and I met for coffee weekly, not as potential romantic partners, but as survivors of the same bomb. We compared notes on the divorce proceedings, shared strategies for handling mutual friends who wanted to stay neutral, laughed bitterly at the excuses our exes kept creating. He was dating already, using apps I'd never heard of, trying to remember who he was before Lisa. I wasn't ready for that, still processing the dual loss of husband and sister. The house became a battle point. Matthew wanted to force a sale, take his half of the equity. I wanted to keep it, buy him out, reclaim the space they'd contaminated. My lawyer argued that his affair had been conducted in the marital home, that I deserved compensation for that violation. The judge agreed, giving me the option to buy Matthew out at 70% of his equity value. I refinanced with my parents' help their retirement funds, becoming my liberation fund. The interest rate was higher, the payments stretched my budget, but keeping the house felt like winning. I hired a company to deep clean everything, then Jennifer helped me redecorate. New bedroom furniture, new sheets, new everything they might have touched. I burned sage like a suburban shaman, exorcising their presence from my sanctuary. 3 months after discovery, the divorces were finalized on the same day. David and I sat in the same courthouse, different courtrooms, ending our marriages within hours of each other. We met for drinks afterward at a bar near the courthouse, where other newly divorced people apparently gathered, a sad fraternity of the legally single. Matthew had tried one last manipulation in court, claiming our marriage had been troubled before the affair, that I'd been emotionally unavailable, married to my career. The judge, a woman who'd seen every excuse in her 20 years on the bench, shut him down with a look that could have curdled milk. Adultery was adultery, she said, regardless of marital satisfaction. Lisa had cried through her entire proceeding, according to David. Playing the victim, even as evidence of her deception was read into record. She'd wanted alimony, claiming she'd given up career opportunities for the marriage. David's lawyer had actually laughed, presenting her income statements and the business she'd built during their marriage. The judge denied alimony and gave David 70% of their assets due to her financial fraud. That night, free of them legally if not emotionally, David and I got drunk on expensive champagne at my house. We toasted to surviving, to exposing the truth, to futures that looked nothing like we'd planned, but were at least honest. He crashed in my guest room, both of us too exhausted to care what anyone might think. The aftermath stretched longer than the marriages had lasted. 6 months after the divorces were finalized, I was still finding pieces of Matthew in unexpected places. A baseball card that fell out of a book I hadn't opened in years. His prescription sunglasses in my glove compartment. The smell of his cologne lingering in a jacket I'd forgotten I'd worn. Each discovery was a small wound, a reminder of the life I'd thought I was living. David had started seeing someone seriously, a pediatric nurse named Amy, who knew his story and didn't care. She was divorced herself, understood the baggage that came with betrayal. They moved slowly, carefully, rebuilding his capacity for trust one date at a time. I was happy for him, genuinely, even if it highlighted my own inability to move forward. I threw myself into work with the kind of dedication that worried my colleagues. 18-hour days became normal. I volunteered for the most complex surgeries, the hopeless cases other surgeons wouldn't touch. My success rate was exceptional, my patient reviews glowing. The hospital board nominated me for chief of cardiac surgery, a position I'd dreamed of but never thought I'd achieve before 40. Jennifer finally staged an intervention 8 months post-divorce. She showed up at my house with 2 other friends and a therapist she'd been seeing, insisting I needed help processing the trauma. I'd been so focused on the legal victory, on winning the divorce, that I'd never actually grieved the loss. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Marcus, specialized in betrayal trauma, a term I hadn't known existed. Therapy revealed things I'd been avoiding. The fact that I blamed myself for working too much, for not seeing the signs, for introducing Matthew and Lisa in the first place. The rage I'd suppressed in favor of cold efficiency. The grief not just for my marriage, but for my sister, the one who'd painted my nails before prom, who'd been my maid of honor, who I'd thought would be Aunt Lisa to my children. Matthew tried to reconnect on what would have been our 13th anniversary. He sent flowers to the hospital with a card saying he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The nurses threw them in the trash before I could see them, but security footage caught him lurking in the parking garage afterward. A restraining order followed, making it clear that no meant no, even a year later. Lisa's attempts were more insidious. She sent letters to our parents, to our grandmother, to extended family, painting herself as a victim of passion, of Matthew's seduction, of my coldness, that drove them together. Most relatives ignored her, but a few bought into her narrative, creating fractures in family gatherings. I stopped attending rather than dealing with the drama, losing not just my sister, but portions of my extended family. The real shock came 14 months after discovery. David called me on a random Tuesday, his voice shaking. Lisa was pregnant. 4 months along, due in January, announcing it on social media like they were a legitimate couple rather than two cheaters who destroyed marriages for their selfishness. The pregnancy news hit me harder than the affair itself. Lisa had struggled with fertility for years, with David putting him through IVF cycles, adoption consultations, the grief of miscarriages. Now with Matthew, she conceived naturally easily, the universe's cruelest joke. David was devastated, wondering if the fertility issues had been his all along. I performed a heart transplant the day after hearing about the pregnancy, giving a 16-year-old girl a new chance at life while my own felt increasingly meaningless. The irony wasn't lost on me, saving hearts while mine remained broken. The girl's parents thanked me with tears, calling me an angel, unaware that angels didn't fantasize about burning down their ex-husband's new life. My parents cut Lisa off completely after the pregnancy announcement. My mother, who'd knitted baby blankets for the grandchild Lisa couldn't give her, now refused to acknowledge the grandchild she was carrying. My father changed his will, ensuring nothing would ever go to Lisa or her child. The baby, innocent in all of this, would grow up without extended family because of choices made before conception. Matthew's family was equally appalled. Catherine called me crying again, saying she couldn't accept a grandchild born from such betrayal. Robert refused to perform any blessing for the baby. His ministerial principles violated by the circumstances. Emma declared she'd be an aunt in name only, that Matthew had chosen Lisa over family loyalty. At 15 months post-discovery, I finally went on a date. Marcus was a pediatric surgeon from another hospital. Someone who understood the demands of the career, the weight of holding lives in your hands. We met at a medical conference in Boston, bonding over difficult cases and terrible hospital coffee. He was divorced too, his wife having left him for not being present enough, a complaint that felt familiar. The date was pleasant but hollow. Marcus was everything Matthew wasn't: attentive, honest, interested in my career, as more than a scheduling inconvenience. But I spent the entire dinner comparing, contrasting, wondering if I'd ever stop measuring men against the ghost of who I thought Matthew had been. Lisa gave birth on a snowy January morning to a boy they named Christopher. I found out through a cousin who thought I should know, though I hadn't asked. The baby was healthy, 8 pounds. Matthew's eyes and Lisa's nose. Pictures circulated through social media channels I'd blocked, but screenshots found their way to me anyway, people thinking I'd want to see the child who should have been my nephew. David sent me a simple text that day. "You okay?" I replied. "No, but I will be." And somehow eventually I was. Not okay in the way I'd been before, when trust came easily and family meant everything. But okay in a new way, harder and more self-contained. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, learning to enjoy my own company. I bought a motorcycle, something Matthew had always said was too dangerous, and took solo trips through mountain roads. 2 years after discovery, I won the position of chief of cardiac surgery, the youngest in the hospital's history. My acceptance speech thanked my colleagues, my patients, my parents. No mention of the husband who'd claimed my career was the problem, or the sister who'd wanted what I had so badly she took it. 3 years have passed now since that night I came home early from Chicago. The acute pain has faded to a dull ache, like an old injury that only hurts when the weather changes. I still live in the same house, reclaimed and redecorated so thoroughly that guests never know it was once contaminated by betrayal. The kitchen where Lisa left her wine glass is now painted sage green, Matthew's beer fridge replaced with a wine cooler. I stock with bottles I choose myself. David and Amy got married last spring in a small ceremony by the lake. I attended as his friend, watching him rebuild what Lisa had destroyed. His happiness was genuine, but careful, the kind that comes from knowing how quickly things can shatter. Amy understood that David would never be the trusting optimist he'd been before, and she loved him anyway. Their wedding had no family drama, no complicated dynamics, just two people who'd learned that second chances were possible. Matthew and Lisa are still together, living in the suburbs, with Christopher and another baby on the way. They shop at the same grocery store I do, requiring careful scheduling to avoid encounters. Once I saw them from across the parking lot, Lisa pushing a stroller while Matthew loaded bags into their car. They looked exhausted, ordinary, nothing like the passionate lovers who'd destroyed 2 marriages for their connection. My mother finally broke her silence about Lisa when Christopher turned 2. Not to reconcile, but to send a letter through a lawyer stating that any inheritance would skip Lisa's generation entirely. If Lisa's children wanted relationships with their grandparents, they could seek them out as adults, without their mother's involvement. It was cold final, the kind of boundary that comes from pain too deep for forgiveness. I've been seeing someone for 6 months now. Thomas is a widower, an architect who understands loss differently than divorce, but comprehends the rebuilding required after devastation. He doesn't push for more than I can give, doesn't mind that I sleep with my bedroom door locked, doesn't question why I never leave him alone with female friends. He knows my story, has never once suggested I should reconcile with Lisa because she's family. The hospital threw a party for my 3rd anniversary as chief of surgery. My success rate has become legendary, physicians from around the country referring their most complex cases to me. I've published 12 papers, developed 3 new surgical techniques, mentored 24 residents. The career Matthew claimed I loved more than him has become exactly as fulfilling as I'd once hoped marriage would be. Sometimes I get messages from women who've heard my story through the suburban gossip network that connects all betrayed spouses. They ask how to survive, how to trust again, how to stop imagining their husbands with other women. I tell them the truth that you don't survive it as much as grow around it like a tree, incorporating barbed wire into its trunk. The metal remains, but the tree keeps growing stronger for having survived the wound. The strangest part is how normal betrayal has become in my worldview. I see it everywhere now, the subtle signs I missed before. The way certain couples stand too far apart at parties. The forced laughter of wives whose husbands work late too often. The men who can't meet my eyes when they learn I'm divorced, wondering if I know their secrets too. Once you've been betrayed by the 2 people you trusted most, you realize how common deception is, how many marriages are held together by willful blindness. My therapist says I've developed post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where trauma doesn't just wound, but transforms. I'm not the person I was before that night in my driveway with David, but I'm not broken either. I'm crystallized, harder and clearer, less trusting, but more honest. I tell Thomas I love him, but will never marry again. He understands, having learned his own lessons about permanence. Lisa sent me a letter on what would have been her 10th wedding anniversary with David. Pages of apology, explanation, justification, and plea for forgiveness. She wrote about how Matthew had been struggling with depression, how she'd been trying to help him, how things had spiraled beyond their control. She claimed they'd tried to end it multiple times but couldn't fight their connection. She said Christopher deserved to know his aunt that family should forgive family. I burned the letter in my fireplace, watching her words turn to ash like our sisterhood had. Some things once broken can't be repaired. Trust is like a heart valve, it either works or it doesn't. There's no partially functioning trust, no 70% forgiveness. Lisa made her choice in my bed while I was at a conference. Every day since has been living with consequences. Matthew never stopped trying to reconnect despite the restraining order. He sent messages through mutual acquaintances, had his mother call me at Christmas, even showed up at a medical conference where I was speaking. Security removed him, but not before he shouted that he'd always loved me, that Lisa was a mistake, that he wanted to come home. Several colleagues witnessed it, the story spreading through medical circles like wildfire, cementing his reputation as the ex-husband who couldn't accept consequences. The victory, if you can call it that, came last month. Lisa and Matthew's relationship is struggling according to the few mutual connections that remain. The passion that destroyed 2 marriages has faded into the reality of crying babies, financial stress, and the knowledge that they're both capable of profound betrayal. They couples therapy, the irony not lost on anyone who knows their story. The therapist, someone Jennifer knows professionally, says they don't trust each other, both waiting for the other to cheat. David laughed when he heard a bitter sound that carried 3 years of processing. They destroyed everything for a relationship built on deception, then wondered why they couldn't trust each other. It's almost Shakespearean in its predictability. He's happy now with Amy genuinely, but the news still satisfied something primal in both of us. I no longer dream about that night, no longer wake up thinking I'm still married, no longer flinch when I see BMWs like Lisa's. The healing isn't complete, might never be, but it's enough. I save lives. Mentor young surgeons, ride my motorcycle through mountains, love carefully, but genuinely. It's not the life I'd planned, but it's honest, built on truth, rather than the elaborate deception I'd unknowingly lived before. Sometimes I think about Christopher and his unborn sibling, innocent casualties of their parents' selfishness. I wonder if they'll grow up knowing why they have no extended family, why their parents' wedding photos are hidden, why certain names make their parents flinch. I hope they learn from their parents' mistakes, understand that passion without integrity is just destruction, wearing a romantic mask. The house is quiet now, no longer echoing with betrayal, but filled with my own presence. I've reclaimed every room, even the bedroom where I caught them. It's my sanctuary now, painted midnight blue with constellation maps on the ceiling, nothing like the neutral beige Matthew had preferred. Sometimes I stand in the doorway where I'd frozen that night, but instead of seeing them, I see how far I've come. The woman who stood in that driveway calling David was broken but didn't know it yet. She thought she could document her way through devastation, that evidence and legal victory would equal healing. She was naive about pain's persistence, about how betrayal rewires your brain's capacity for trust. But she was also stronger than she knew, capable of performing surgery the next day, of rebuilding alone, of choosing dignity over the collapse that beckoned. Now when people ask if I'm married, I say no without elaboration. When they push about why someone so successful is single, I smile and change the subject. My story isn't dinner party conversation, isn't a cautionary tale for strangers, isn't something that defines me anymore. It's simply what happened, what I survived, what made me who I am now. The ending isn't happy in the traditional sense. There's no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no family reunion where love conquers all. Instead, there's something harder and more honest: acceptance. I accept that my sister and husband were capable of profound betrayal. I accept that some wounds don't heal clean. I accept that trust once shattered can be rebuilt, but never quite the same way. But there's also triumph in this ending. I kept my house, my career, my dignity. I didn't burn down their lives, though I could have. I didn't let bitterness poison my future relationships. I learned to love again, differently but genuinely. I discovered that losing everything I thought mattered revealed what actually did: integrity, self-respect, the ability to save lives, the strength to rebuild alone. So when people ask how I survived finding my husband with my sister, I tell them the truth. You don't survive it. The person you were dies in that moment of discovery. But if you're lucky, if you're strong, if you have even one person like David who understands your pain, you can build someone new from the wreckage. Someone harder but clearer. Someone who knows that family can betray you, that wedding vows are just words, that the only person you can truly trust to save you is yourself. And that person, that crystallized version forged in betrayal's fire, is actually an upgrade from who you were before. Because now you know the truth about human nature, about family, about love. You know that people are capable of destroying what they claim to cherish most. But you also know that you're capable of surviving that destruction, of performing heart surgery the next morning, of rebuilding a life that's entirely yours. That's the real victory, not the divorce settlement or keeping the house or their inevitable relationship struggles. The victory is standing in your own life, clear-eyed and honest, knowing exactly who you are and what you've survived. The victory is saving lives while your own heart still bears scars. The victory is loving again, despite knowing how love can betray you. The victory is being here 3 years later, whole in a different way than before. So I want to ask you, have you ever had your world destroyed by the people you trusted most? How did you rebuild? When everything you believed turned out to be a lie? What would you do if you came home early and found the two people you loved most betraying you together? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about surviving the unthinkable and rebuilding from ruins. Share this with anyone who needs to know that betrayal isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of your truth. Thank you for listening to my journey through devastation to something harder but more honest. Remember, the family you choose after betrayal is stronger than the family you were born into. Until next time, trust yourself more than you trust anyone else, and never apologize for protecting your peace.